Big time fight coming up this weekend at welterweight. We have the debut of Indiana's own former B2 Fighting Series welterweight champ Cameron VanCamp, and he's going to be taking on a tough test in Sanford MMA's Andre Fialho. And listen, Fialho is one of those guys that, if he's not a household name just yet, maybe in South Florida and in parts of Portugal, realistically all of Portugal, but if you look at it for Fialho, 2 quick fights in the UFC. One against Michel Pereira at the UFC 270 main card. And listen, he was taking on a really tough test and a guy that's somewhere in between the top 25 of the UFC's welterweight division in Michel Pereira. Competitive fight there. Only earned $12,000 for that fight. And then all of a sudden he's taking on Miguel Baeza as a hefty little bit of an underdog. And in that fight, giant knockout. And that one wasn't all that long ago. So on April 17th, late into the night of Fialho's fight against Baeza, Spinning Backfist sent out a tweet saying that Fialho had been kind of talking to Dana White, saying he wanted to get on the UFC 274 card. Ultimately, April 30th, the tweet goes out there that he's going to get an opponent, and it is Cameron VanCamp. So this one on relatively short notice for Fialho. His last fight was just about 2 weeks ago, so it really is a short notice opportunity for both of these men. And for Cameron VanCamp, he was supposed to make his UFC debut last fall against Nicholas Mata, moving down to 155 pounds. And we'll talk about VanCamp's weight because throughout his career, he spent the majority of his time at welterweight, some pit stops at 155 pounds.
No idea how he makes that weight, by the way.
No, he started his career. Also has one fight on his record at featherweight, so that's kind of wild, too.
Because he's big.
Yeah, he's a giant guy, even for welterweight. But a big opportunity for VanCamp, and even as recently as March, if you ever follow that UFC roster watch on Twitter, out was Cameron VanCamp. So I thought maybe he'd get an opportunity to kind of ply his trade back on the regional scene again, because he has a good level of competition on that record. Most of them are losses. All of them are losses. But still, he's fought some decent names. Like, he has a fight against Austin Hubbard at lightweight. Lost that one by finish. He has a no contest on his record against Thomas Gifford. Well, Gifford submitted him by guillotine in the first minute of that fight, but listen, failed drug test. And then he fought Bobby Volker in a 5-round fight for the Shamrock title, and he was unsuccessful in that one. So, Matt, for Cameron VanCamp, a guy that's definitely not as well known as Fialho, because this is a guy that used to be co-main eventing Bellator shows against Chitty Bang Bang and Joe Kwani. But when it comes into this one this weekend, honest to goodness, the deck is kind of stacked against Cameron VanCamp.
It really is, and I'm really happy that the UFC did grant Andre Fialho his wish, because the second he knocked out Miguel Baeza, what's the first thing he said in the mic? Give me more fights. I'm ready whenever. He didn't have a specific name, which I'm not a fan of. I gotta be honest, I like it when a fighter gives a name. Make the UFC's job easier than it has to be, and then they'll probably give you that matchup. But I did like how active he wanted to be. I do worry, though, with his fighting style, it's probably not the type of style you want the guy being in there every month, every 2 months with, because that's the thing about his fight with Baeza. Was the finish beautiful? Yes, it was. He brutalized him with uppercuts in the clinch, and that wasn't a position I thought he was going to have a lot of success with, to be completely honest with you. So it was really nice to see from Andre Fialho. But you had brought up the stats really quick right before this, and it is a little bit telling that he did eat 24 significant strikes in the early part of that fight. The finish was very nice, but I do worry about Fialho when he does start to fight those upper echelon strikers. And I'm talking about more guys like Jeff Neal, guys in that category who are near the rankings, because what they're going to do is they're going to wait for you to throw your flurries, they're going to find the openings in your flurries, and then they're going to counter really hard down the middle. And I do worry about Fialho when he does start to fight some of those upper echelon guys, because he has shown the susceptibility to getting hit on the feet. Now, he has one of the greatest Uno reverse cards of all time, and it's, hey, if we're in 50-50 exchanges right now, well, my punches are going to hurt a lot worse than your punches are going to hurt, so my damage is going to be able to accumulate over time. But I will be curious when or if Fialho, let's say, gets someone like a Daniel Rodrigues, someone who's outside of the rankings, but we respect them almost like they are a ranked fighter. I think that would be a phenomenal fight if he is able to get past Cameron VanCamp. But this is a weird fight, because I agree with you 100%. For Fialho, to say he could get into the rankings right now, it's a bit of a stretch, but he has accepted two fights that most guys in the first 2 UFC fights would not accept. If you're accepting a fight against Michel Pereira and Miguel Baeza, you must think quite highly of your own skills. And I like what you mentioned about him being able to fight in large shows in Bellator. He was not some guy who just showed up and we didn't know who Fialho is. He has some good wins on his record. He has a few losses on his record, but they're 2 recognizable names. And I guess that's the thing I want to say for both guys. I'm glad you brought it up for Cameron VanCamp. His record might not look great as a guy just coming into the UFC, but the one good thing about his record is the losses are to people who we know. They're not to fighters who are 8-6 and they just sort of went off into the ether afterwards. They're recognizable names, like you had said, Austin Hubbard, Bobby Volker. I know he fought Robbie Lawler all the way back in the day and got head kicked by him, but still, these are names that are recognizable if you've been paying attention to the sport for long enough. So it's not like Cameron VanCamp can just get beat by any guy who has a decent record on the regional scene. But fighting Andre Fialho on full notice, I think would have been really tough. Now you're accepting this fight on short notice. Like, Fialho just came off of a camp in a fight where he didn't take a ton of damage, although he got hit more than I would have liked to. So he's still probably in fighting shape, getting ready for this fight.
Yeah, the weirdest part about this one, and if you want a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon this weekend with Robbie Lawler, you've got Bobby Volker, who fought against Cameron VanCamp. Volker loses to Robbie Lawler. CJ Vergara's coach is Pete Sell. Pete Sell beat Robbie Lawler, so it's kind of crazy that way. But when we do look at this fight, for Fialho, technical boxing, good when he uses leg kicks, but he doesn't do it very often. And the best weapon in his arsenal is his left hook. And you saw that against James Vick in that fight. But realistically, Baez is one of those guys, kind of like an Ovince St. Preux, where Baez is always pressuring forward. Ovince St. Preux is always on the back foot. It's just when those two guys figure out the distance, that's when they really look amazing. And for Ovince, once he can time you when you're coming in, he can knock you out. Once Baez can figure out, once Fialho can figure out, okay, I have my openings when I'm pushing forward. You're not prodding your jab out there. You're not throwing kicks forward. I'm able to really go in there and do a lot of damage. That's when you see Fialho winning these fights. The great win streak that he had 4 in a row before he made his UFC debut. He was able to do that to great effect. And even before that, you look at some of the losses. Antonio Dos Santos Jr., the loss to Glyco França over with PFL. It was a loss on his record, overturned to a no contest because França was on the sauce. And then the loss to Chris Curtis, where it was the takedown defense and a bit of the accumulation that kind of won out for, I guess, Curtis in the fight against Fialho. For Cameron VanCamp, though, we haven't really talked about him stylistically. This is a guy that can get it done in a lot of different ways. He likes to switch his stances. He'll start out in southpaw, pump the jab out there. He switches over to orthodox, starts to throw his kicks. And he really likes to mix in his takedowns, but they're not the traditional, like, he's not going in there, double leg, taking his time. A lot of body lock takedowns, a lot of trip takedowns. He is a different fighter and a tricky guy to figure out. And once Cameron VanCamp has that going for him, he can really start to roll in some of these fights.
And that's the thing. I think if VanCamp just completely smothers Fialho, he can have a lot of success even on the feet in this fight. Because the thing is, if you're not letting him throw, you're not taking any damage yourself. And the thing about VanCamp, he does have fairly good cardio. He just has weird cardio where sometimes he will be doing a lot. He'll be doing kind of unnecessary movement, if we are being honest, from the outside, because he'll switch stances, but sometimes he'll switch, not really throw anything, switch back, not really throw anything. You'd like to see a little bit more activity out of those stance switches, just because while it's fresh in your opponent's memory, you're not really giving them time to set and figure out where exactly you are. If VanCamp does do that on the outside, if he's doing a bunch of wasted movement, this is going to be an awful fight for him, because if Fialho can start to chop down those legs, eliminate some of that movement, you're going to get rid of some of the explosion in his own takedown attempts. VanCamp eventually will become a sitting duck on the feet, and that is the big thing about him. You brought it up earlier with his multiple weight classes he has spanned throughout his career. He's a guy who has made 145 and 155 in the past. Now, I don't think you can look at Cameron VanCamp and tell me honestly you think he could make 145 pounds. At this stage of his life, he has built up quite a bit, but I do feel like with his punching power, he's going to be at a seated disadvantage in this matchup, and I do think he's going to play the striking game probably a little bit too much early on. This is what I will say about Fialho. He's almost like, it's like betting on a pie chart that has like 60% wins by knockout, and the other 40%, I do worry about him fighting some of the more crisp strikers. I think offensively, he is phenomenal, but I do worry about him defensively when he does throw his own power shots. Again, I don't think this fight against Cameron VanCamp is going to be the one that costs him, but it will worry me going forward.
VanCamp can sometimes lead into his blitzes with his head wide open, right out there in front, really hittable that way, and when he strikes on the back foot, he tends to put his hands out and leave his head up, and it really is a bad combination.
And it's interesting for a guy who's as tall as he is. Normally you'd see them use the jab, try to use different techniques like that. Like, we're going to talk about Tony Ferguson later. Tony Ferguson's best move is his front kick to the body. I don't care what anyone says. His front kick to the body is ridiculous. Now, he hasn't used it as much as last couple fights, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but if VanCamp had more tools like that, I think it would help him a lot. But you're right, he does find himself reaching a lot for 4 strikes, and it's weird to see for a guy who could weaponize his height so well.
Switches to orthodox and then ducks his head to the right every single time. Again, super short notice, but you duck to your right a lot, and Fialho's best strike is his left hook. That's a method to get knocked out. So we have a look at the votes on Tapology. This fight was just announced yesterday. There are no odds. I'm going to say over under 90% Fialho.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. 261 total votes, 93% Fialho, 86% by knockout. For the 7% that have VanCamp, 47% by knockout. I've got Andre Fialho in this fight 10 times out of 10. If Cameron VanCamp wins, I will be muy surprised.
If VanCamp's going to win, it will be with his grappling. Again, Fialho does have an Achilles heel, and it has been his wrestling defense in the past. Now, that's why I like how they've matched him up, to be honest. I like the last 2 guys. They've been sort of these action-style fights. I think this will probably end up becoming one of those fights, and if it does, it's going to be a tough one for Cameron VanCamp. I do like Fialho quite a bit.
Neither one of us going with Lebanon, Indiana's own. We're going with Portugal's own, Andre Fialho in this matchup. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in a dynamic matchup at welterweight. And listen, big time title fights up at the top. Namajunas aspires to number 2, and Charles Oliveira taking on Justin Gaethje. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.